By 2050, 70% of the world's population will live in cities. They've become the cauldrons of diversity and difference and have long captured the imagination of artists, designers, and creative cultural types. However, as we return back to the city, some places are becoming increasingly unaffordable to the creative class. And frankly, some are becoming only playgrounds for the wealthy minority. As David Byrne just recently wrote in The Guardian about New York City, rampant inequality is squeezing out the artistic genius that made New York such a vibrant cultural capital. We cannot let it happen. If the 1% stifles New York's creative talent, I'm out of here. Please join me in welcoming Richard Florida back to the stage for a conversation with global curator Jerome Sans and artist Kenny Scharf about our cities and how we can keep creatives in our cities. Thanks.
Well, thank you. I learned a lot already. And I think we want to move the conversation from music and design to art. So we have two great panelists. I mean, I don't really have, they speak for themselves. I mean, Kenny Scharf is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, graffiti artist and artist of our time. He's done incredible stuff in New York. He's done incredible stuff here. He's done incredible stuff all over the world. He's done incredible stuff for brands. He made a bike that was in the Tour de France, which is cool because I'm a cyclist. And he lives in Los Angeles, but he knows cities. And we've had the opportunity to talk about cities many times before. And then my great friend Jerome Sans. Jerome is from Paris. He's lived all over the world. He and his partner Morgan spend a great deal of time in China. He's built and curated art museums everywhere. And we had the most incredible experience. Jerome and Ron and I met on a very pragmatic project. We were actually asked to help Meridian reinvent their brand. And Jerome really created an amazing thing where he created an art program with local artists, and the key cards became artworks, and they invited you into the soul and the heart of the city. And then Ron and I and Steven and our team built up these really cool lobbies filled with books that we don't know how much about interior design, guys, but we knew that a place should be part of a city, and the idea and what we cared about was books. We felt sometimes that the hotel lobby was too loud with the music and makes your head go, but books and the way to look at the city and the way to experience the city through written works was very important. So we had a magnificent product. Kenny, I'll start with you since you've experienced the raw city and the gentrified city, and I don't care where you start. I don't care if you start with New York when you were younger, LA now as it's booming, Miami, but how do you, because you have a really great ground zero bird's eye view, how do you view this connection between art and if not city neighborhood, if you will?
The connection between art and city neighborhood?
Yeah, and what you did, like what we used the city as your canvas in part.
Well, you mentioned the different cities, New York, that I lived back moved there in the late 70s when it was down and out, and then kind of watched the change there. I lived here in the 90s. I watched the change go on here. I live in LA, where I'm originally from, and I'm experiencing a lot of changes going on. My neighborhood, when I got there in '99, was no white people would dare be there, and now I'm getting kicked out. So I've seen it over and over again. The artists, keep moving into neighborhoods that they can afford, that no one else wants to be. Because of their presence, they change the neighborhood, make it good enough to develop, good enough to put, some cafes and restaurants, and then the artists get kicked out. So it's just like the revolving story. Where do you go next?
Yeah, and Jane Jacobs, who I mentioned before, had this incredible, she had so many great one-liners, but the one I always like the best is that new ideas require old buildings. When you think about that new ideas require, whether it's cultural ideas, and we see this in New York with the high-tech companies coming right to the same areas of Chelsea and Soho and Tribeca. We see that, it's not the Silicon Valley anymore. The $2 billion venture capital neighborhoods in the world are in urban San Francisco. You see it in Wynwood, right here. You see the tech companies coming with art galleries. So, but the one thing about cities, I just want you to, they're big. Somebody was saying this. In New York, if it doesn't happen in Manhattan, they go to Brooklyn, and they go to Queens, or maybe hopefully New Jersey, where I grew up. Miami, the same thing, from South Beach, LA. How do you see that kind of not only migration between cities, but over your time, especially your work, your practice, moving within cities?
How do I see what about it?
Do you see like the neighborhoods changing? Has your practice moved to different neighborhoods, or do you just essentially switch a city?
Well, I think I'm staying in LA. I'm not switching cities. So at the moment, I'm looking for another place to work, and it's not easy. I don't know where else to go, honestly. So it's a predicament that I'm in at the moment.
Before we get to Jerome.
I live in Culver City.
No, it's okay. I think a real constant of this, from Nellie's points about Toronto to your guys' points about design, is that creativity requires these spaces. And these spaces keep getting priced out as very smart real estate developers see them as the places. I mean, you think about Chelsea, you know, first it was a gay community, and then it was an art gallery community, and then there was a High Line, and people said, holy shit, I can make a boatload of money by building high-end condominiums that sell for $4,000 and $5,000 a foot. But I think this idea, and you mentioned the grants too for the artists and musicians, this idea that if we want vibrant cities, we have to invest in it. It just doesn't happen. Jerome, you know this stuff. I mean, you've worked all over the world. We've talked about it. And like I said to Kenny, I don't really care which city you start with, whether it's Paris or Beijing or Miami, but yeah, or cities we worked on with the Meridian, where, you know, how do you see that intersection between, and maybe not just the art community and the city, or artists in the city. You've also worked on this nexus of museums, of large-scale cultural investments, like you and Morgan, cultural institutions, building them. How do you see this kind of mix playing out?
Well, let's maybe continue what he said and what you keep saying yourself. It's creativity is what makes a city. And the city exists always the same story. It's a permanent historical fact that you just mentioned. First, there is a neighborhood, artists go, they are nomadic. We are gypsies. We are creative people, musicians, architects, designers, artists. All creative people are inventing always neighborhood, cities. Then it's taken by real estate. Then they move to another place. It has been like this since centuries. It's not a new fact, it's permanency. It is how all the art history, if you look at the art history, it was a permanent migration of population and creative people from one city, one country to another one. So it's an historical fact, it's a permanent fact. So we are inventing cities. It's not real estate people, they're always thinking they are making it, they are just signing checks on the back of creative people. Then they go somewhere else. Then people follow them. But cities are like bodies, like our body. It's moving all the time. It's never stable. This is why your life, like my life, like all of your work as well on tour all the time, we are always on the move. You cannot stay stable anymore. We are always between different cities. We cannot be, you live between Miami and Toronto. You seem to be the same. You traveling all the time. We are commuters. It's impossible to live anywhere anymore, like in the ancient time, like your parents, my parents. It's over. It's impossible. If you are in the creative industry, you have to be on the road all the time. There is no fixed time, no fixed places. It's over, this romantic idea of one living place.
That's creatives are nomads, and I think that's the advantage of a global gateway city like this one. But I want to ask you, it's not a hard question for you, but it might be a hard question for Miami. You've worked at some of the greatest museums in the world. You worked here. We experienced your fantastic exhibit last year at the Basel with Peter Marino. Miami has struggled with this thing, big time, Jerome. We have a lot of wealthy collectors, many of whom are my great friends, who decide we want a museum for our own. and we can make it available, and we have a proliferation. We have several museums that are trying to become museums, become bigger museums. What can Miami do, in your view, humble view, to fix this issue? Or can it not be? Is it too crazy here that it can't be fixed?
The problem is most of the museums I see nowadays are still functioning like in the old time. Yeah. It's like in the music industry, you would think you would have a record label making everything for you. Today, it's over. Time has changed. Completely different way of working. Artists are no more just counting on the gallery system, even though it's still very important. We are living in a completely different time. So museums that I see here and there, not just in Miami, but mostly globally wise, are still functioning what was invented in 1950s. They are still working like isolated in their island. They don't think about communities. They don't think about cities. They don't think about having no more fear of opening the windows to the outside and breathing. You know, it's like we were like living in a cave. So once people will understand that a museum should be a vibrant place of location, integrating communities, it will never function. If it's just a destination for outsiders, it doesn't make sense.
I have found that sometimes I see in museums, they don't want the general public involved.
Yeah.
Because those aren't the people. It's some.
Yes.
I've witnessed it, and it seems sometimes that certain museums, I'm not going to name names, but they want.
But you can say anyhow, we are just between us.
Oh.
And nobody's videotaping.
Okay, well,
That's not a video camera.
No, exactly.
I'll explain how I saw stuff. So MoCA in LA had
Voilà.
a street art show.
Yeah.
It was the biggest,
Yes.
highly attended show in their history. Jeffrey Deitch came in as director. Before he got there, MoCA was a ghost town. There was no one in it. He puts on this show. There was lines around the block every day for months. It was bringing so many people in that I would never think of going to a museum. Well, they kicked him out. The museum is back to where it was. It's a ghost town again. And it's almost come to the conclusion, they don't want the people from the community coming to the museum.
You're right.
They want their gala dinners. That's really what they care about.
And that's because we were talking about how creativity comes from the streets, and everyone can resonate, not just the person with money who knows. You know, I mean, it's like wine and art. Like, talk about a working class kid from freaking Newark, New Jersey. Try to figure those two things out. It's a lot harder than figuring out urban planning, like what wine to order, what art is supposed to be good. Holy shit! Why does that have to be a barrier? People like what they like. I saw it at the McQueen show when we went. Like, holy shit! I'd never seen the Met like that. But I think there's a really interesting thing that you guys are triggering in my head that my students talk about. So my students study technology, high technology. They want to be entrepreneurs. They want an incubator. They want a place to go. Why can't the freaking museum, sorry, excuse my French, be also a place that provides space for you? You said you're looking for space. Why couldn't a museum not just be where we put dead people's shit, art? I mean, that's all cool. Why couldn't it be, you said this community thing, why couldn't it be like in tech we have an incubator? Why, and that's core to what John and we're trying to build here. That's what this is trying to be. But why couldn't a museum? I mean, it just struck me. Could it?
Absolutely, it's possible. It's what we did in Paris in a small place called Palais de Tokyo. It's what I did in Beijing, leaving people to work, accepting musicians to record things inside, accepting architects to make their own firm within the place, accepting artists to stay with us, because we wonder, what does it mean to be a cultural place where there is zero artist after the opening living inside? What does it mean? How can you pretend it's cultural where there is no cultural actors, but just technocrats? So we were against that, and we invited all creative people to enter the place, creative industries, young people, people who have money, no money, whatever. Place where you could exchange dialogue, sometimes dispute, which is very good too, but a place where you can share, invent, be inspired by other people, get some energy from others. And most of those places just accept themselves. They are afraid of the others. They're sometimes afraid of being popular. Popular is something that they want, but they are afraid with. It's something like very paradoxal in this world.
And you think about it, the museums occupy like the central spaces where Nellie said she would go. Like, museums are not, well, there are a few that are out in the country, but they're generally in the heart of a city. So to make them a place that's not only for viewing, but for, do you have any examples, or Kenny, do you have any ideas on how a museum, like whether it's, maybe not MoCA now, could create an incubation space or a working space for other artists?
Well, back in the 70s, 80s, PS1
Exactly.
in New
Was
York,
the place.
I had a studio there. That was fantastic. You had exhibition, you had artist studios. It was kind of like a little community. Now it's part of MoMA, and there are no more studios there.
And what has it, what has it become, just?
Exhibition space.
Okay. Now, and I was thinking the other thing, since we're in a university, like it also extends to us too, right? And this space is a good example of an incubator, but in fact, universities occupy a lot of central space. that could be used, and sometimes, we think but to be used to fuse kind of practical people, artistic people. I think there's an interesting model that you guys are onto here. Jerome, any other examples of this kind of activity, or whether you've seen it in China, whether you've seen it in Paris, whether you've seen it elsewhere?
It was somehow how the Pompidou Center in Paris was invented as a multidisciplinary place where there would have no more boundaries between disciplines, no boundaries between the outside and the inside. That's why the ground floor is open to everybody. There is no fee to pay, so there is no limit. So it was a place to share, democratic, whoever you were. It's where I have to say I learned everything. It was kind of our model for my generation, because you could have access to everything without being anyone. So it was absolutely unique. And there were places in London. Riverside Studios was another place where I get to meet Jean Genet. I could meet, at the time I was 23, I could meet immediately Richard Long, Gilbert and George, with no problem. At the cafeteria, they were all there discussing, inventing a new project together. So it was much more the kind of open places where artists were inventing project. But it was another time where economy was very different. It's completely different today, so it's difficult to compare yesterday with today.
See, Nellie said that she likes growing cities, and I resonated with that. It's why I really like Miami. It's why we love Detroit, because it's growing again. It's why we like Toronto. And I mean, I like New York, but it's not the same. It's really not the same to me. I like it. We go. But I wonder what your guys, because you both know Miami really well. Like all cards on the table, strength and weakness. It's growing, it's global, it has a lot of vibrancy, it has a lot of great spaces, it has a lot of great neighborhoods, but also has its issues. So whoever wants to go first, like what do you, how do you see it, and how would you try to push it in the direction of being better than it is?
I think the biggest problem for Miami is transportation.
Yeah.
There's just getting worse and worse. There's no plans how to get around. Can't get from there to there. Why don't they have a train or something going up and down the beach? Why?
So Nellie said the most important thing to her early career was the subway in Toronto. And now any metropolitan area, by the way, that gets to 5.5 or 6 million people, whether that's Toronto, Miami, if you don't build transit infrastructure, you're dead. You will just die. You will become so congested that nobody can, I mean, you see it here. People are throwing up their hands now.
Yeah.
They're like, last night, screw it, I can't take it, I'm not coming back.
Forget it. Why should I try to go over there on the other side
I
of
mean,
the
it's
bay?
the same thing in Toronto. It's the same thing in San Francisco. It's the same thing in Washington. Everyone, and the great metros that we know, New York and London, they built transit systems that move people around. Now, you might not think they're the most beautiful things, but they made those investments. Anything else other than transit, though? Is it space? Is it art community? Is there something else other than, but transit is super number one. Anything else?
For me, that when I lived here and I was watching, why is there no investment in that? It was still small enough where it didn't seem that impossible. I mean, I do think that's like the major thing, because if the artists want to go to outer areas because they can't afford to be in the center, well, why are you in the city anyway? If you're going to be outside the city, then you can be anywhere.
And the place that shows that in the music business is Nashville. I mean, Nashville, under the leadership of Carl Dean, a great friend of mine who became mayor, who loved music, he just said, I'm not going to push the musicians to the periphery anymore. And Vanderbilt's great and all that shit's cool, but I'm actually going to build an economy around musicians, and I'm going to invest in musicians. I'm going to have a director for music and economic development who actually makes investments in whatever, venues, studios. So they kind of push them into the economic mix. What do you, Jerome, you know Miami really well.
Yes, I know. I just come from Nashville, and I have to say this is a very good example. Since once you arrive at the airport celebrates the uniqueness of the city by the airport. All the art history of country music and other music is by the airport. If you arrive at Miami airport, what do you get? Because an airport is the entry of the city. It's the first thing you have. For me, the first thing is the airport.
You nailed it. You nailed it.
More than the transition point, because we have car, we can make whatever. We can move, we can walk. This morning I was walking all over because I had no cab. But for me, the most important thing is the airport. The airport is your identity, the cultural identity of a place. And here,
billions. The biggest single investment a city will make is the airport. And we did. I'm a nerd, so We did the research, and I didn't want to believe it. I wanted to believe that it was human capital, talent, technology. We looked at the effect of an airport on a city's development. It was as important as any other factor. And you have this huge asset, but what if you could get a group of creative people, like Nashville did it, Austin did it, but to imagine an airport as a part of museum, a part of an incubator, not a freaking mall. Everyone wants to make a, you go to the airport and it's the same, nothing wrong with the brands, they're all lovely. But it's the same 16 shores where rich people are supposed to go and buy duty free. To reimagine that, I think you're right. That grabs your soul.
And then the experience from the airport to the city. Then this should be the entrance of a real city. And most mayors forget that. They don't treat that. And this is the identity of a place, more than anything you can put in the city. The entrance makes everything, because it's the first experience you have. If it's traumatic, like when you enter into Paris, I take my own small city, I'm sorry about that, but it's a garbage can from the airport to the city. It's horrible. It's a nightmare. So it's a shame for supposedly beautiful city, romantic city, it's only garbage from the airport to the city.
And what we do when we look at Yabel Pushberg's work, and we look at the W, and we look at the addition, we looked at the hotel lobbies, we worked on the hotel lobbies, we thought about the intersection of art and music and the right kind, because there is a kind of music that's too loud, and there's a kind, and we thought about coffee. I mean, we thought about all this stuff. Nobody thinks about that at an airport. Like an airport as a lobby, as a hotel lobby, I don't know what the words are, as a design feature.
They should be invited to work on this as well.
No, and the whole musical.
No, the whole thing, the whole experience should be a real something
and
new.
The food,
art,
and the food,
music,
and the music,
everything,
the whole
everything,
thing.
everything.
So.
So not Cinnabon.
No. And Cinnabon is like the worst thing for you because it makes you fat and it makes you unhealthy.
Exactly.
It makes you go to sleep.
Yes, and the smell in an airport is something unbearable in America. I have to say, sorry from France, it smells. Wow,
But the
strange
smell of the
food,
addition,
horrible.
but the smell of the addition
Horrible.
is spectacular. The hotel, right? When I go to the hotel, I didn't know you. I don't know if you design smell, but I go in there and the hotel smells beautiful and the airport smells disgusting.
Exactly. So I never understand these differences. And people don't get it.
And there
It's
is a
key.
precedent. I'm not a big, I do like football, and I'm not saying this is the perfect model, but when they built that stadium out in the Arlington, Texas, he decided, I'm not saying it's the same art I would want, but he was going to put art in that, and I remember, I just tell you one guy's story. When I lived in Pittsburgh and I was on the board of the Andy Warhol Museum, and I haven't thought about this in 20 years, but we said when Pittsburgh was building a new airport, we should put some of Andy's art, because we had it. And I remember the airport, I feel bad, please don't record me saying this, said, yeah, we'll take some of those designs and make them in wallpaper, but only if we can change the colors.
Oh my God.
Only if we can change the color.
Only.
I have one last thing to say because we're running out of time, and it's about Miami. Nellie, I didn't know you recorded an album here. I kind of knew you did some stuff here, but I didn't know the extent of stuff you did here. Kenny, I didn't know you lived here.
I did.
I was on the plane, and I had a 5-hour flight. I had a flight from Toronto to Kamloops. I don't know if anyone's ever been to Kamloops, but I watched the Amy Winehouse documentary. I had no idea that she wrote Back to Black in Toronto. Not in Toronto, in Miami, on one of the islands. We don't know any of this shit. And I think this is an important point. We don't know. It is not like in Nashville, every single person.
Absolutely.
And I think the point that I want to make, and you guys can add if you want in my closing, is as much as we celebrate all the other things, great real estate development, great cruise lines, great sports teams, we better get with celebrating this creativity thing. And not only Jimi Hendrix's greatest performance was in Miami. The Beatles' first thing was, I can go on and on, where they met Muhammad Ali was in Miami. We don't celebrate that. And
Jackie Gleason.
Jackie Gleason with what was the thing in the intro?
June Taylor Dancers.
Yeah, the June Taylor Dancer, and they came in on the boat, water skiers. Yeah, and people forget all this stuff.
Absolutely.
And this idea of building, you guys said it about the narrative for your designs, but building a narrative of a place, that doesn't just happen by magic. That narrative has to be something that comes from celebrating the real city builders, who are the artistically and creative people. So I just wanted to say thank you to both of us, and both of you and all the panelists. And I think Dean Brian Schreiner wants to come and add a few closing remarks, if that's okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.